Welcome to the Spirit-Led Men at Work podcast, where I interview Christian men from all walks of life with varying job titles who have one thing in common. They are all choosing daily to be led by the Holy Spirit at their work. And because of that, they are leading, prospering, glorifying God, and experiencing joy and purpose in their work. And you can too. Hello, Spirit-Led Men. Welcome to episode 009. Today I'm going to interview Kondrich. Kurt spent 2 decades protecting and serving his local community as a police officer. In 2003, Kurt's wife Margie gave birth to their daughter Chloe, who was diagnosed with Down syndrome. While the couple eagerly welcomed their second child, Kurt was horrified to learn that many babies diagnosed prenatally with this chromosomal condition are aborted. Although the future was uncertain, one thing was clear: Chloe was a blessing from God. Kurt and Chloe became vocal advocates for legislative change. The father-daughter duo visited the Pennsylvania legislature to advocate tirelessly for the passage of the Down Syndrome Prenatal Education Act, or Chloe's Law. It ensures that families are given positive, factual, and uplifting information about what to expect after a Down syndrome diagnosis. Today, Kurt is Senior Director of Development for Human Coalition. He shared his passion for life at churches and on college campuses, and he relishes one-on-one conversations with pro-lifers seeking deeper engagement in an effort to end abortion. Kurt calls engaged pro-lifers investors in the most valuable resource we have, human lives. This is a very powerful interview. I'm sure you're going to get a lot out of it. I wanted to apologize up front for this cold that I'm battling and my nasally voice, but I did not want to wait for it to pass before I went ahead and recorded this introduction so I could release this interview. The total interview was about 60 minutes, so I could have kept it to one episode, but due to the fact that this intro is going to be a little longer than normal, and because of the length of the interview, I've decided to split it into 2 parts. I wanted to share a bit of my testimony before I introduce Kurt. If you've listened to episode 000 for this podcast, where I talk about my personal life and kind of what makes me tick and what my philosophy is about the podcast, you would know that I'm far from the model Christian who is in a position to tell you how to live your life. I made a lot of mistakes in my life, and I specifically didn't share a lot of gory details, but I let you know, there was particularly in the earlier part of my life, I made a lot of mistakes, and I was not pursuing God. Well, there was one detail I left out that I honestly didn't think I would ever share on this podcast. But after this interview, I've decided to share it. And when I was in my 20s, a woman that I was dating and she became pregnant. And together we chose to have that baby aborted. We chose to end that baby's life. That was a failure on my part to lead as a man and do the right thing in that situation. And it's a horrible thing that I did, and I regret it. Since then, God has blessed me with a godly wife and with 3 daughters. And it's difficult to look back on that, but there's several reasons why I wanted to share it. And let me just first say, too, that I truly know in my heart that child is in heaven, and that I will meet that child one day in heaven. And second thing I want to say is that I guess one argument for sharing something very personal like this is that it might benefit some of you maybe that can relate to this. Just like sharing any testimony has the potential to help somebody by hearing something that they can relate to or that encourages them in some way. But I also wanted to point out that I think if we make any one sin too big, that it's overwhelming, I think we're missing out on a couple things. First of all, we're missing out on the power of what Jesus did on the cross and the grace that comes with being a believer in Jesus Christ. And the other thing is that, every sin that we commit and our sin nature that separated us at birth from God, every single sin is unacceptable, and every single sin meant that we needed a Savior. So while we might make some sins bigger than others, and I'm not minimizing at all abortion or the fact that I made that choice, but I'm just saying that I think the devil can have his way when he convinces us that something we've done is so bad that we can't even talk about it and we have to keep it to ourselves. So I guess I would encourage any of you, if there's some secret that you feel like you just can't talk about with anybody, maybe not in a public forum like I'm doing here, but if you feel like you've just got to keep something to yourself because you're embarrassed by it and ashamed by it, I would encourage you to share it with somebody and let God's grace wash over you and heal you for that sin. I don't know if there's much else to say about that. I did not bring this up in the interview when I was talking with Kurt. I thought about it, but I didn't want to make it about me. I didn't want to detract from what Kurt was saying. I did share it with Kurt after the interview was over, and he was very encouraging. We had a good talk about it after the interview. And then I prayed about it, and it just felt like it was the appropriate thing to share this with you guys. The most important people in my life already know about this, so it's not like this is the first time I'm sharing this at all. But again, I hope that's helpful, and it's probably enough said on that. So let's go ahead and get right to the interview.
Kurt, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today. I'm real excited about our interview, and I'm just going to get started right away with the question I always ask right off the bat, which is, when and how did you become a Christian?
Okay, Dave, thanks for having me today, and thanks for learning about my journey. As a child growing up, I belonged to a church organization. I was raised Roman Catholic, attended service weekly, but I said that the thing that was missing, I was not really connected to the church organism. So after I graduated from college, I went on to become a police officer and kind of fell away from my faith for a while. I'll be honest with you, was not attending church, and it kind of lost a lot of hope in mankind and in society, and and in my faith, honestly. And then when I moved back to Pittsburgh and started working for the Pittsburgh Police Department and got engaged, and it was when my wife was pregnant with our first child, my son Nolan, when I first saw the ultrasounds is when I can say that was my moment when I really trusted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. I was so overcome by the miracle of life, seeing my son in the womb, sucking his thumb, moving his feet, and my wife and I began attending a Lutheran church at the time. My Pastor Eric, was the one who got me reading the Word and prayed with me, and he was the one who was instrumental in me accepting Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. But I can honestly tell you, it was when I witnessed the miracle of life in the womb of my wife that was really, I can say, the moment that I accepted Jesus.
So it was that appreciation for life that made all the difference, I guess, huh?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was overwhelming because as a cop, I was always interested in facts and evidence and eyewitness things, and nowadays you talk about caught on camera, and seeing that ultrasound image of my child was just really, it overtook me, the miracle of life, and just thinking of, just thinking about how conception, that, an egg and a sperm as big as a pencil point in 9 months turns into this child and is delivered. It's just, there's no greater miracle that we witness in our culture.
I agree. Talk to us a little bit about your career as a police officer. What got you involved? What made you think of becoming a police officer? And then just kind of walk us through a little bit about that career and maybe how your faith played a role in that career.
Absolutely. As a child growing up, I was a child of the 70s. I always loved watching Superman and Batman. Those are my two favorite shows on TV, and superheroes going out and protecting people, battling evil forces, and defending others. And so as a kid growing up, I'll be honest with you, I wanted to be a soldier or be a police officer. I was always fascinated with courage and honor and valor. So when I went to college, I majored in criminology at Indiana University of Pennsylvania, and when I graduated, I was set on going to work in a city that was filled with crime, much to my parents' dismay, because I figured that was how I'd be tested and that's how I could have the greatest impact. So upon graduation from college, I applied in Atlanta, Georgia with the Atlanta City Police. They were hiring a lot then, a lot of crime down there in the city, and flew down there, took the test, and was hired pretty quickly to be a City of Atlanta police officer. And something that was very instrumental to me was when in my days in the academy was very difficult down there. It was almost a 50% washout rate. But there was a sign above the door in the academy every day I walked in there that said, you can talk about what's wrong with the world or you can do something about it. And that's something, 30-some years later that's always stuck in my mind, how so many people talk about all the problems there are and, this, but then when you start drilling down with them, you find out that most people aren't doing anything about it. They're not doing anything to affect change and to address these problems, these evils, these things that are corrupting society. So that as a police officer, like I said, is stuck in my heart. I always said as a cop, your badge is on the left side of your uniform because that's where your heart is. And if as a police officer you don't love people to the extent that you're willing to lay down your life for them and defending and protecting them, then you have no business being a public servant as a police officer. So that's rang very true with me and has just been imprinted on my mind throughout my policing career and really throughout what I'm doing today in my career as a pro-life advocate and working at Human Coalition.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And just in case I forget, sometime during the interview, just let me take a moment to thank you for your service. And just remind you that most of America, in my opinion, honors and respects police officers and appreciates what you do. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Thank you very much. And it was an honor to serve, and it was, I would say, no greater thing I've done with my life than serving and protecting people.
Great. All right. Now, let's move on to, you might say, another phase or important part of your life. In 2003, your wife, Margie, gave birth to Chloe, and during the prenatal phase, you were given some news about Chloe. Walk us through that experience leading up to and including the birth of your daughter.
Absolutely. 2003, my wife was pregnant, and we knew from the ultrasounds, we knew we were having a girl, so we actually had named her Chloe. She was still in my wife's womb. At that time, my son Nolan was 4 years of age, and he was very excited about his sister coming into our family. But during the pregnancy, my wife and I were both 40 at the time. There was a lot of pressure to have these prenatal tests, and I kept asking the medical people, well, why are you pressuring us? And we were told, my wife and I, that we were at high risk for having a child with Down syndrome. Now, I like to stop there, and just, relay to people, what does the word risk mean? Well, risk, it means danger, it means, it's not a good word. Risk is something that you shouldn't be, venturing into, but we were told we were at a high risk of having a child with Down syndrome. So, and truthfully, at that time, I'd been a police officer for like 18 years. I didn't know a lot about Down syndrome, but, we weren't going to do anything if our child did have Down syndrome or anything else. So I remember asking the medical people, why are you pressuring us at the high risk? And I said, well, let's say we do these tests and it comes back, positive for Down syndrome. what do we do then? And then I can remember the people saying, well, you can make a decision, whether you want to keep your child or not. And I'll be honest with you, that just absolutely shocked and appalled me. I'm thinking I'm in a hospital, and at that time I was a city of Pittsburgh police officer. I'm in a hospital in the city of Pittsburgh, and medical people are telling me I can have a test on my child, my daughter, and if the test shows that my daughter doesn't meet this misguided cultural mandate for perfection, my wife and I can legally kill my daughter in this hospital in the city of Pittsburgh. And just the mere thought of that was extremely disturbing to me, beyond disturbing. And, I think it should be disturbing to anybody listening to this podcast or anybody in our culture that we as people are able to kill our own children because a test, says that they're not, perfect, and what the culture says should be perfection. So, like I said, my wife and I refused the testing. Our daughter Chloe was born, and she asked for it during her birth. They were clearing her lungs. She was crying loudly, and I remember asking the doctor if she was okay, and he said, "Oh yeah." Then he walked over with his mask on and looked down and told my wife and I that Chloe had signs, characteristics of Down syndrome. And, like I said, of course we were surprised and this and that. And I said to the doctor, can I hold her? And he was almost like surprised that I wanted to hold her. And he goes, "Oh, you want to hold her?" And I said, "Yes, bring her over." So he brought Chloe over to me and I held her, and I'll just be totally honest. She was a beautiful little girl. She was my daughter. And, I think my wife and I both we'll figure this Down syndrome stuff out. We just wanted our daughter, our child, our DNA, to be, healthy and well, and which she was in our view. And so we took Chloe, and like I said, we moved forward in a positive way. I said focusing on her abilities, not her disability. And I tell people just who I meet throughout my journey in life that we're all disabled. Every one of us has a disability. If I want to see somebody who's really disabled, I just go look in the mirror. Every one of us has things we're good at and things that we struggle with. And we knew that Chloe would have some things she would need extra help with, but it's been fine. And like I can tell you right now, my daughter is now 13. She's fully included in her neighborhood school. She's reading at grade level, reads as good as a lot of the cops I worked with, and has brought nothing but light, goodness, and purity into this world. She brings things into the culture that are desperately needed: unconditional love, purity. And what's really cool about Chloe, I'd been a cop for 20 years, and Chloe doesn't have malice. She'll never hurt anybody. She'll never intentionally go out and cause harm to another individual. So I tell people, when you watch the nightly news, tell me who the disabled people are of our culture, because Chloe's definitely not one of them.
Wow, that's awesome. Just a couple of things that came to my mind as you were sharing that with us. The first was that whole issue of word selection, that they use the word risk, which does have a negative connotation, and there's other ways they could have said that, I'm sure. And then the other thought I had was your comment about how we all have disabilities. I mean, as Christians, we of course are aware that the sin that we all have is a bigger disability than anything physically that we could have. And so, I mean, I think our awareness should change our perspective on that whole issue.
Absolutely. And, that, like I said, I've told people too, if you live long enough, you're going to become disabled. All of us are one car accident, one illness away from becoming disabled. And if we as a culture are legally able to go in and kill a human being because we think they have a disability, if we're able to do it prenatally, then why don't we do it postnatally? Why don't we, when somebody becomes disabled, why don't we have the right to get rid of them? Because maybe they're a burden, maybe they're a risk at that point. So it's a very slippery slope when you start. I call it's eugenics. It's a silent genocide. It's identifying, targeting, and eliminating people because you say they don't belong here. It's exactly what happened in Nazi Germany. As a matter of fact, the first people they came for in the Holocaust were the disabled, and then they moved on to the Jewish people and anybody else who didn't agree with them. But it's a very slippery slope because, like I said, we're all disabled, and we're all at any given day, any given moment, an accident, an illness, a slip from becoming completely disabled. And if you do it prenatally, then we could start making the argument. Let's do it postnatally.
All right. So what made you decide that you and Chloe would become vocal advocates for legislative change, and as well as what was the end result of that advocacy work that you two entered into?
So, those experiences during my wife's pregnancy with Chloe of being, kind of pressured to have these prenatal tests, and also being informed that, if we had them, we could terminate our child, if they came back positive for Down syndrome or anything else that we didn't agree with, it deeply disturbed me. So after Chloe's birth, I learned that the estimates are anywhere between 70 to 90% of children who are diagnosed prenatally with Down syndrome are terminated. They're killed. And I started, getting active and involved with the disability field, and I started talking to a lot of families actually across my state of Pennsylvania and really across the country, dialoguing with them for support and just for feedback. And what I discovered was that every single family I spoke to, communicated with, whatever, who had the Down syndrome prenatal test, which we did not, but the ones who had it and were told that their child had Down syndrome, every single one was told to terminate, basically encouraged to terminate this child by medical professionals, that they were, terms used were like defective, this child will be a burden, she'll cause stress to your family, they might be able to do a few simple tasks, and it was always negative. Nobody told me anything positive after getting these prenatal diagnoses, and so once again, that deeply offended me, because I'm watching my daughter grow, I'm watching her read and grow and have an amazing impact on her brother, on our family, on the culture, and I'm thinking that's false information. That's akin to telling somebody to smoke cigarettes because they're good for you. I look at this. They were telling to get rid of a human being, and it was completely negative and false information being relayed. So I just thought, something has to be done about this, and I figured, as a man, as a Christian, it's my responsibility to make sure that I do all I can to set the record straight. So I began advocating, first of all, for programs that would support kids like Chloe. I always tell people, I'm not just pro-birth, I'm pro-life, meaning I believe in defending, protecting, and embracing human beings from time of conception to the time of death. And there's individuals in our culture who need extra supports, extra programs, things like early intervention and other things. And so I began advocating at our state capitol for these things. And during that time, introducing Chloe, I would take her with me a lot and take her into offices and have her shake hands. And she's on a book called Brilliant Souls. I'd have her sign the book and read some to it, and to the senators, to the state reps. And actually, she's met with several governors, and just to like I said, focus them on her abilities, to show them. I've asked legislators and policymakers to look my daughter in the eye and tell me she's any less valuable than other citizens, which they couldn't do. So it was through that work I just myself and a couple other friends of mine who have children with Down syndrome thought we need legislation in Pennsylvania so that when a family gets these prenatal diagnoses, instead of being told to terminate, they have to be told positive, supportive, factual information about these children. So we just really, with like a notepad now, we started making notes, drawing up things. I started talking to members of the legislature up here. At the time, Tom Corbett was the governor. He was very pro-life, and he had met Chloe several times and supported everything about her and her abilities. And I just started planting those seeds, and we came up with this Down Syndrome Prenatal Education Act, and they actually dubbed it Chloe's Law. So once a member of the House had one of his staffers write the law up, it was real simple. Just I said the law would ensure that a woman who gets this diagnosis is given factual, supportive, uplifting information. I went around just meeting with legislators, garnering support, making sure that they understood what the law was about, and it moved very quickly. I will tell you, it was God's hand moving the law. And in June of 2014, the law was passed overwhelmingly in the Senate, Pennsylvania Senate, and the Pennsylvania House, and was signed into law by our then Governor Corbett. It was really cool. Chloe and her friend Alex and Thomas got to also attend the thing, and all three of them got to sign the law there at the Pennsylvania Capitol. So now it's a law, and so a woman, instead of just being told to abort, will have to be told the positive side of having a child with Down syndrome. Ultimately, my goal is to end abortion in this nation, but this was the beginning. And the law has been kind of a catalyst for across the country for other legislation, and also just for bringing awareness to the fact that these kids are being, targeted in a silent genocide. A lot of people didn't know about it because they couldn't see it. Now with this type of legislation, that the facts are out there and people can start having conversations about what's going on and the stuff that's going on. And I ask people, Dave, frequently I say, what if we have a prenatal test for autism? How about one for baldness? How about one for depression, anxiety, ADHD? Who knows if we break genetic codes down what we'll have. I said we could reach a point in our culture where everybody who is deemed a misfit or not worthy to be here is aborted. So it's a very slippery slope.
I'm just curious, what kind of press coverage did this get?
It actually got very good press coverage, and believe it or not, it still is. It was written up in the Pittsburgh papers, the Philadelphia papers, Harrisburg. It's been written up in several magazines. It's been on a couple TV things, a lot of media things. I actually, believe it or not, I did an interview on NPR about this out of New York City, WNYC out of New York City. I did an interview about this law. A lot of media coverage, like I said, online type stuff, but also several magazines and newspapers covered the law. So that's been the blessing. I think God has used this law to bring attention to people about this. And like I said, this is not a political issue. I mean, this is nothing to do with Republican, Democrat, Independents. This is a life issue. When members of our culture are being systematically eliminated because of, their genetic makeup and because others feel that they're defective, and as I said, God help us. God help us prenatally and God help us postnatally, because it's a slippery slope, and it's akin to genocide and eugenics. So it has gotten really good coverage. I feel very blessed about that.
Well, that's good to hear. You've said that being a police officer is a lot like being a pro-life advocate or vanguard. Can you share with us why you make that connection? And also tell us what you consider to be the definition of a real man.
Sure, absolutely. I think real men are missing in our culture today, unfortunately. I think, real Christian men, it's something that we're in desperate need of. And a real man to me is a servant, is a person who fearlessly will protect, serve, and defend the most vulnerable members of our culture, women, children, people with disabilities. And a real man is somebody who is willing to take a stand and be a loud voice for truth. And for me, truth as a Christian is found in God's Word. I tell people that the difference between the Word and the world, just the spellings, it's one letter, L, and the L in world will get you lost. And a real man his life is rooted in the Word, and he's not afraid to go against what, if the culture says something that a real man knows is incorrect, then he should be willing to take a stand and to draw a line and say, no, that's not going. I'm going to do something about that. A real man is somebody who takes action, and his number one priority as a man, as a father, as a husband is to root his family and those around him in I always say the only source of eternal hope and security, which is Jesus Christ. And that has to be reflected in a real man's personal and professional life. It's something, it can't be the number 6 priority, the number 10 priority. I unfortunately, I know a lot of men who could spout out hundreds and thousands of sports statistics and facts and this and that, but couldn't tell you one quote from the Bible. So, I challenge and I call men to be leaders, to be Christian leaders, to be people who are willing, like I said, to defend and protect. And, that's one of the reasons I feel like the culture is collapsing and why divorce is so rampant and why all kind of perversions and things are occurring in our society, is because men have not taken their role, have not taken the lead of being out front as servants. Like I said, a leader, in my view, is a servant, is one who is willing to lay down everything, sacrifice his own life for others. That's what a true leader is, and that's, in my opinion, is what a real man is.
I agree. Now, you are now a part of the organization called the Human Coalition. Can you tell us a little bit about that organization, what its mission is, and how you're involved, what your role in the organization is?
Absolutely. Human Coalition is a national pro-life organization that has grown from successful Christian business leaders who came together and realized that, we need a national voice, national pro-life voice that is willing to do battle with the culture of death and to transform our culture. So Human Coalition is basically, it's a champion for life, and really our mission is to transform our culture of death into a culture of life, and the mission is to end abortion in America. Abortion is a stain on this country, and God, who gives us life, which is the greatest miracle on this earth. We look at a lot of this technology and think it's so exciting. There's no greater miracle, no greater gift than the gift of life. He's going to hold us accountable for how we act, to defend life, and what our response is, for defending human life. Thomas Jefferson wrote, "I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, and his justice cannot sleep forever." Well, Human Coalition, I'll be honest with you, we tremble also. We're a collection of individuals who are bound together to answer this call, to do all we can to remove abortion, the stain of abortion, from America. And I'd call us agents of change, not simply because we are against abortion, but because we don't just say we're just against abortion. We are for life. We're pro-life, as I said earlier. From time of conception to the time of natural death, we're for preborn babies. We're for protecting them. We're for absolutely protecting women and helping them to choose the miracle of life. We're for holding families and embracing them and walking with them when they need extra help and support, and doing all we can to help them to be the best possible mothers and fathers in our society. And if we're living in a good society, a civilized society, then protecting life needs to be the number one priority, absolutely. And that's what we do at Human Coalition. And I am now the Senior Director of Development at Human Coalition Pittsburgh. So, my goal is to spread the word, is to spread the life word, and to get people to invest in our mission, which, as I've told you, is defending and protecting and restoring a culture of life across right now our region of Pittsburgh, but across our nation and ultimately across our world. Until this is addressed, I do not, I don't think there's any greater issue. When people talk about issues, some people say, well, that's just one issue. And I say, no, it's not just one issue. It is the issue. You think about it, since 1973, we have killed we're approaching 60 million of our own citizens, our most vulnerable citizens. Every day we kill 3,000 plus children in our country. From the time you go to church on Sunday to the time you return the following Sunday, 24,000 children have been killed through the instrument of abortion. We're coming up on 44 years of that, and the time has come. Time has come within our lifetime. This is our time in history to end this Holocaust.
It occurred to me as I was preparing for this interview that most people would probably consider abortion to be a woman's issue. Of course, you're a man. What advice would you give men who maybe don't feel comfortable getting involved and playing a part in this particular issue, or any other issue that they might consider to be out of their comfort zone or outside of what our culture would consider would be appropriate or good fit for them as a man?
Well, as I've said, Dave, abortion is the American Holocaust. We're approaching 10 times the Holocaust of World War II, and the number of innocent children that have been killed. And so men need to play a lead role in ending this Holocaust. And, the president and co-founder of Human Coalition, Brian Fisher, has a book, Abortion, the Ultimate Exploitation of Women, and it's actually going to be available in our store on January 9th. And I'd like to share this quote with you about empowering men. If we did believe that every woman has infinite value and that we as men should partner with them and give ourselves up for them, we would not consider abortion an option. Abortion exploits women. It is harmful to their emotional, spiritual, and sometimes physical well-being. Abortion degrades females and widens the gender gap. It ultimately empowers men and demeans women, and I think that really sums up a man's role, from Brian, of who we should be as the leaders to end this scourge. If a man was a server and protector of his wife and embraced his child from the time of conception, I would argue we would change the culture completely. You know, we're going to end abortion by changing hearts, not through legislation. It's changing the culture, and if men would stand up and embrace their role as husbands, as fathers, as protectors, as leaders, then I would say abortion would end. If men valued women and looked upon them as priceless gifts, which they are, and became excited about their child in the womb, and let that woman know from the time that baby was conceived that they were going to be there and they were going to defend not the child, just the child, but also the woman. I don't think a woman out there would even be thinking about an abortion, to be honest with you. So, you know, men's failure to act, their sins of omission, has caused this sin of commission, and men by not acting, you know, it's time for them to wake up and to embrace their roles as men and to be the leaders in ending this scourge of abortion.
Very well said.
Men at Work, I hope you've enjoyed this interview as much as I have. We just heard about Kurt Kondrich's journey being spirit-led at his work. Each of our journeys are unique, but hopefully you've heard something in this episode to inspire you and give direction for your own personal daily work life. You can find links and other info from this show at spiritledmen.com/009. Until next time, when we will finish the second half of this episode, have a great day and God bless.